So I'm joined today by three colleagues, and we're going to try to talk about curriculum. And because I know lots of people in the sector are grappling with what is curriculum, what does it mean for me, how am I going to work it out, do I have to do loads of extra work? So I'd like everyone's going to introduce themselves. So Shaddai, do you want to go first and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Shaddai Tembo. I am a lecturer in early childhood and an early years writer and speaker.
And Mine?
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Conkbayir with a funny surname, and my raison d'etre is getting developmental neuroscience on the early years agenda. I write books on the subject, give talks, deliver training, and I hope I can be of some use today.
I'm Sally Cave. I'm currently head teacher at Guildford Nursery School and Family Centre. I maintain nursery school, but prior to that I have taught the primary age range and spent a lot of time in reception classes.
Brilliant. And I'm Donna Gaywood, and I'm the Birth to 5 Matters coordinator. So I've got a list of questions that I think if we just say our bit and we can just have a conversation, hopefully it'll be helpful to our colleagues. Okay, so my first question is this: I've been talking to a lot of early years practitioners who are worried about uncertainty about creating a whole new curriculum. They think they've got to write a whole new curriculum with all the changes in the early years. And I'm just wondering, so I think most of us all were part of the Birth to 5 Matters groups that worked on the documents, but what advice would you give to practitioners who are panicking about curriculum? Who wants to go first?
I can kick us off.
Go on then.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree with that, Donna. I think there probably is a lot of uncertainty at the present moment around the Birth to 5 Matters guidance and how to implement it and what it's going to look like in practice. But for me, I think I'd see it as an opportunity. This is a really good moment to sit back and reflect on your practice and your setting, review the resources that you're using, review your planning, look at what's going on in your setting and see how you can improve and make those adjustments. Certainly coming from an equalities and inclusion perspective, it's really, really exciting because we've got this really good document that looks at race and racism, gender and LGBT plus inclusive education. So I'd see that as an opportunity to look at your resources, look at the way you're talking to children, look at the way you're engaging with families, and use this as an opportunity to reflect on your practice and see what you can do to implement a more inclusive pedagogy with your young children.
I also think the fact that it isn't a prescriptive document, it therefore doesn't inhibit the practitioner to do what they feel is best by those children. And I think that's really important, because in the past that has been an issue for practitioners, and it just becomes mundane and going through the process. We've done this. And I think Birth to 5 Matters leaves it far more open for you to do what you feel is right, but for those individual children, taking into account what they bring into the settings. And we know post-COVID, there is a lot of heightened anxiety, attachment, separation issues as well. And I just think it frees you up to do what you want while giving you the guidance. It isn't saying you must and this must look like that. There's none of that going on there. I do think it's a rich document and you can make of it what you will.
I'd agree, and I'd just say again, we don't have to have it all. Whatever you want to do doesn't have to be done now. You can take your time over this, and actually, as both of my colleagues have said, it's a time to reflect, a time to evolve and not change everything. If you were a good setting before, you're still going to be a good setting, so that's not changed. But the Birth to 5 Matters, particularly those early sections, are fantastic just to take and just to reflect on, well, we already do this and this and this, and this is really good. Actually, we could tweak these quite easily and improve, and these things we'll work on because actually we haven't been doing them, or we can do them better. So, that's how I'd be looking at it to start with.
I think that's a good point, because when I've been talking about it with colleagues, in that process of reviewing and evaluating, saying, oh, hang about, we do that. That in itself is really empowering. Like, oh my goodness, we are on the right track. Then it frees you up creatively to say, what about this? Like you've said, why don't we try this? Why don't we change this area of provision? What about, let's do that. And I think it's brilliant for that. And that's the feedback that I've been getting. And that's reassuring
And I think what I love about Birth to Five is it is aspirational and inspiring, you know, and actually, however good you are, there'll be something in there that you think, oh,
definitely,
and you know, something to work towards, and you know, and as you say, that's exciting.
So in terms of curriculum, I just want to go back to this. So are we saying that do practitioners, being really practical, do they have to write a whole curriculum before the children arrive, or is it something that emerges? What are you thinking and saying about that?
It would emerge with the children. Surely, we were speaking earlier on, they are not empty vessels into which we pour knowledge. It's not that, you know, John Locke perspective. It's deeper than that. And like I said, they've come out of COVID. There are so many complexities to take into consideration. And, you know, like we were saying as well, or you were saying mainly, Donna, it has to be co-constructed with these children. You can't pre-plan everything and have it written there. It doesn't work that way. That is so detached from anyone's lived reality, and it won't serve anybody.
You also might have, you will have as well, opportunities that you afford children that are unique to your setting. So whether that's woodwork or gardening or cooking or something. So you are offering those are planned, but you know, only planned in as much as not from a product point of view, but that you're going to offer it and you know, teach children certain skills. You know, they do need to know how to hold a hammer safely, but there's still a lot of choice. But
yeah, I would agree with that. And I often think that children have as much to teach us as we teach them.
Absolutely.
And it's about following their interests and realizing what they come to the setting with and what they bring to the setting in terms of that cultural background, and following their interests as much as possible.
And I think that's what Birth to Five Matters excels in. It really, because I'm just like thinking back to our section on child development, the unique child, it really does do that, Shaddai. It enables and it encourages that practitioner to go with where the child is at. Don't be afraid to follow that child's preoccupations and their strengths and their backgrounds, and incorporate that into the curriculum, most definitely. And that's what I love about it.
So it says I love the glossary. I don't know, I mean, I've said this about a million times on lots of different, I think the glossary is amazing, because it just gives power to the people, because it gives you understanding. And I had to look curriculum up. I was talking to someone a while ago about curriculum, and I thought, I kind of know what it is, but do I actually know what it is? And it actually says in the glossary that a curriculum is a plan for children's development and learning experiences, both formal and informal. And I think that's what you're saying, isn't it? There's a space for formalized learning, and informal learning. And those, Mina, you were talking about children coming into the settings who are very distressed, and planning for how you're going to settle those children. Could that be seen as curriculum, do you think?
I think it's part of your delivery in your provision, absolutely. A lot of it will be spontaneous based on what those individual children bring you, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to comforting a child and making sure they feel settled enough to learn, to thrive, to socialise. But yes, it is planned within that curriculum, definitely, while being spontaneous in the incidents.
Yeah, it's complicated, isn't it? It's a complicated...
But we can't separate the care and the education. It shouldn't be that way. If our children don't feel secure and soothed, you know, like Dan Siegel's safe, seen, soothed, secure, the 4 S's, they will not thrive in that setting. So we cannot separate them. That is a dangerous thing to do. That is why I say it's all part of that holistic, you know, curriculum, whether it's planned or not. It is all included, and it has to be. It has to be.
You have to go back to your principles as well, don't you, to help you plan? So if you are, you know, you believe in taking the child from where they are, and the child within the family, within the local community, then actually you also know a little bit in advance how you're going to settle children, and then you bespoke it to each individual.
Absolutely.
So there's plans at different levels, but it's not all, you know, well, your settling process and your whole, those general ideas may be written down for parents, but the individual bits are just, it's not written down, because you are doing it in the moment, aren't you? So.
But I suppose as well, I'm interested in Shaddai about because you're saying, and I agree, you know, completely, that children can't learn unless they're soothed and calm, they feel attached and all the rest of it. But equally, Shaddai, you were talking about that sense of belonging, of knowing who they are and that they're part of a community. That's really important, and that could be planned for in the curriculum as well, can't it?
Absolutely. The planning starts the moment we get to know the child and follow their interests and find out what their family is about and what their cultural background is. That's so important to planning for the child and engaging with the wider community. So it's really crucial that we have an understanding of who the child is and where they come from and what their interests are, so we can begin to develop those links and plan in the long term. Obviously, in the moment, we'll be following the child, looking at their daily interests, but a long-term picture, it's really, really important to build up those community links and that family engagement. So planning long-term is really important to develop a child's sense of belonging, but we also need to be planning in the moment on a day-to-day level, following the child's interests as well.
And the other thing I think is quite interesting that I quite like, this is me personally, when I'm in practice, is kind of getting a sense of a group as well, because sometimes you get groups of children. I mean, this is just my experience, that say they get really into, I don't know, I had a group of children, well, that's a bit dark, but we had a group of children had significant death in their family. And we raised some chicks and one of them died, and they just got really into it. So the play just got into everyone being dead and then ambulances coming. But as a group, we kind of, we didn't really plan that, but we kind of took that as a group. There was like a group dynamic that went with it. Or you might get a group of children who just kind of hit each other all the time. And that's not okay. So you have to kind of plan a broader sort of group curriculum about setting down how we interact with each other. Because I know people are saying that at the moment, children are coming in and they're not able to, and they don't have those sort of skills, those interaction skills. So that's all part of curriculum planning as well, isn't it? Do you think? Is that, am I talking?
Yes, because the play is spontaneous and you join with, you follow that child, but actually you're planning to be, to be in their play.
In the play.
When invited or sort of encouraged by the child leads. But yes, by joining in their play, you can then often divert, I'm not sure that's the right word, the hitting each other into something more.
Yeah. And I suppose with the sort of death play, we just got lots of books about those things to help children kind of process what was happening in their lives and in their lives.
I think sorry, go on.
No, go for it, Sam.
Just taking on your thing of Donna about, you said about books, and that sort of illustrates in some ways the different levels of planning, because actually we do plan to, read certain books each term that we believe are really, really important, with that strong repetitive refrains, etc., sort of core books. And then we have other books that we also would share with children. And then there's those books that you read because a child is interested in something that you haven't necessarily thought about, but you actually get them because they're so interested. So that almost demonstrates your different levels of planning. I'm not saying it all needs to be formally written down. I'm just saying there are different levels. I mean, if you just take books when you're thinking about the children.
It's also a fantastic example. I'm so sorry, go on, Asha.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, it's a beautiful example of spontaneity and also being truly child-centered in your provision, because you are taking those children's very real, very painful preoccupations and giving it a space for expression in whichever way suits them best, while gently guiding them into, well, maybe not so much of this, and how about that, and using the resources that you have at hand to help them process those emotions. And I think that's so important. Like we were saying earlier on, it's not about having these preconceived ideas of, well, it's autumn, so we're going to do this, or we can't do that because there's no room, this is on the agenda. No, it frees you up to say, actually, where are these children at with what they're interested in, and how can I extend that for them? How can I be part of this? And that's such a brilliant example of how to do that.
Yeah. One of the other things that I think Ofsted has said, I'll just read it out for you, is that leaders need to assure themselves that the curriculum or the educational programs, just to say educational programs and curriculum, when Ofsted talk about it, they seem to use those interchangeably, just for practitioners who might be watching this, because it can freak people out, those two different terms, but they seem to be using, yeah, well, it's complicated, isn't it?
Educational programs.
I mean, it's like, oh dear, that they're met and it's sufficiently challenging for the children it serves. And I think I'm just interested in how if you're going with planning in the moment, which is what we're talking about, How do you make it sufficiently challenging, would you say, for the children that the curriculum serves?
Your knowledge of those individual children will guide you in what they're, you know, capable of and what they're thirsty for next. But I'll you know, pass over to someone else to carry that one on. But when we know our children, we know what they want more of and what they need less of. It's just instinctive.
And if you are going on from what you're saying, you're taking every child from where they're starting, you'll go further to be more challenging than if you'd planned it in advance. Because if we planned for, let's say, a typical 3-year-old, actually we won't be extending many of them, but actually, and equally their interests, they lead us. So I think some things do need planning for. You know, not everything can be spontaneous and in the moment. But as long as you take the children from where they are, then the sky, there is no limit, is there?
Yeah. And that's the beauty of Birth to 5 Matters. And I know I'm parroting myself, I'll say it again anyway. It's not prescriptive, so the practitioners will not be left feeling scared to follow the child's lead and go, oh, but they're showing interest in this. Oh, I can see they're really, you know, engaged with this. Maybe I'm going to take it to another level and try that. And again, that's why I think the document is fantastic, because it does give the practitioner the impetus to do that, instead of going, well, this is the age band, this is what it should look like. And no, none of that, no room for that.
Shaddai, I'm going to say something.
I completely agree. I think if you as a practitioner know your child and you know that relationship that you've got with them, I think that's a really important starting point to be able to challenge that child and scaffold their learning and facilitate their interests in different ways. Obviously, it's important that we know certain things as practitioners and are able to guide their learning in certain ways. When we think about equalities, when we think about, for us, we know the importance of valuing difference and celebrating diversity. They're the sorts of things that we can begin to incorporate into the child's play. But starting with that relationship with the practitioner and the child is a really, really important foundation, I think.
Yeah.
And those the Birth to 5, when we talked about the ranges, but they are really helpful. If you're new to early years or that age group or something, and you've got a child, you can look at that. As I said, there's no ages, so you can see where that child is best fitting, and it's got that advice as to what you could do or what you could provide. It gives you that guidance.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to summarize what we've been talking about, and if I've got this wrong, you can jump in. So let me just summarize for people who are watching. Hopefully this will be helpful. So we're talking about curriculum. So the first thing is, what Shaddai just said, is knowing your children is the most important thing. So that relational aspect, to be able to build a curriculum, it's important to know your children. The curriculum can be formal or informal, and it needs to be responsive to the needs of the children as they come in. And we know that they're having or have had or are having a really difficult time during the pandemic. But that's the second thing. Sally, you talked about different levels of planning. So we talked about kind of informal planning and sort of being responsive, but you talked about the kind of broader planning, and that's again taking it from the children's interests. And we talked about making everything so that it stretches children, but again we're coming back to taking it from where the children are at themselves. And I think Shaddai, you talked about the importance of children belonging and seeing themselves in, you know, in the setting. Is that right?
Yeah.
Have I missed anything else that we spoke about with curriculum? I'd
like the emphasis also on not separating education from care to be highlighted again.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, because what you've said is as well is that when children feel settled and cared for, they will learn. And when they see themselves and they feel that they belong, they will learn. So curriculum has to take that all into account. So in summary, people don't have to write massive reams of curriculum. My last question is there any place for celebrating autumn? Is that something that we can do, or is it?
Absolutely. Yes.
How do we weave that into the curriculum? How does that happen? Because people love doing autumn. Pardon?
Engaging with nature is so important for our well-being, for children's speech and language, if you like. Everything is important about being outside. So you can't fail to experience autumn then, can you? So you will be, you know, hopefully taking your children somewhere where they can, you know, walk through crunchy leaves and throw them up and let them fall on them, conquer hunting, all those things. But the children will lead you in that, you know, so you can't really fail to not do autumn. You know, there's far too many double negatives there, because actually it's all around us, and that's how you do it.
Brilliant.
And
so,
then you'll be choosing books to go with those. You know, they're fascinated in some, you know, hedgehog they may find or something like that. You know.
As long as it's not dictated by the adult.
Absolutely.
And they have no say in it, you know, then
Yes,
there's no point.
Yeah.
Well, it might be that if they are out with their stamping through leaves, that what they really like is stamping on things. So you might want to do a whole topic on stamping. I mean, I'm making it up, but that's the truth, isn't it? It might not be the leaves that they're enjoying. It might be the stamping and the crunch. So it could all be about crunchy stuff. I mean, just going out there.
Sensory integration activities.
Well, who knows?
The joy of that, following the child, is really that equally, if you think that they're really, really interested in crunching and this kind of thing, the real danger is that, you know, you might think, well, I'm going to plan a whole week's worth of things, but actually by tomorrow they've really moved on. So I would suggest you don't do reams of planning, but actually
you're not wrong. I can remember doing a load of planning. Some children started playing going to the cinema. So we did massive planning on going to the cinema, but once we'd made the popcorn and done it once, everyone was a bit fed up with it. Hang on a minute, guys, we've got this week's worth of planning. Yeah, they just didn't want it. So you're right. Okay, one last comment from everyone, and then we will say goodbye. Anything, any final comments or thoughts about curriculum?
I'd like to say to believe in yourself as a professional, to know what you're doing is right by those children, and not to fear the word curriculum, because it's just when you look at that child, you take them in and their family, that is the curriculum. You start, like we've said before, you start from the child and you take it from there. For me, that's the takeaway I'd like you to hold on to. Brilliant. You know what you're doing generally. Don't rewrite the script. You don't need to. I think Birth to 5 Matters is a beautiful add-on to what you are already doing, and it will just help enhance your provision for those children. Don't fear it, embrace it.
That's great. Last comment from Shaddai, you want to go?
I agree with Mina. And you know, both of the this Birth to 5 Matters document and the Development Matters, the aim is to reduce paperwork ultimately. So the less time you can spend worrying about the curriculum or whatever, and the more time you can spend with the child, the better. I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day. Yeah.
Following on from that, I would just say, remember, every interaction is an opportunity to connect. And so actually goes with those things, isn't it? Just interact, play with your children, know them.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, thank you so much for that discussion, everyone. I've just put the key messages for people watching that you can take home about how to plan and think about curriculum. So use this time of change as an opportunity to reflect and review your practice, taking time to think about how and what you're planning for your children. Think about what you're doing well. Knowing your children is the best place to start when planning for their learning. Supporting children to feel safe and secure and that they belong will put them in the best place to learn. Building on the wealth of experience, knowledge and life that children bring from their communities will enrich your curriculum. Any educational programs or curriculum will be most effective if they're co-constructed with the children and based on their interests. Plans should be responsive and flexible. You can plan in different ways at different levels, in the moment and in a more long-term way. Ofsted seem to use the terms educational programs and curriculum to mean the same thing. Offering activities such as woodwork or cooking are also part of the curriculum. Planning for groups of children can also be supported in different ways. Your curriculum plans or educational programs should extend children's learning. So I hope you found that helpful. Thank you so much again to our 3 panelists who've been part of the discussion.